So when I first went to Atlanta, I had applied at 3 studios and got internships at all 3 studios. One was Boston Recording, which was Bobby Brown's studio back then. Another studio was Doppler Studios. And the third studio was DARP Studios, which was Dallas Austin Recording Projects. Literally within 2 weeks, my internship was done. I was actually working under NHP Sound, and he was working directly with like Outkast and Bobby Brown and TLC, like some of everybody who was everybody in Atlanta. And I became his assistant. He took me under his wing, taught me how to actually record the 2-inch tape properly, the way that he liked it, because all he wanted to do was mix at that point in time. Working at Bosstown, I always worked the night shift. I literally lived right behind the studio, so I'd go down whenever I can. And John Merritt, the studio manager, actually needed a night studio manager and asked me if I wanted to take the position since I was always there between there and the other 2 studios. Bobby Brown used to come in real late in the morning, 4, sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning. His engineer had already left for the day. He had been waiting like 6-7 hours or whatever. He's like, I'm done. And so me being a night studio manager, he came up to me. He's like, call my engineer, blah, blah, blah. I called the engineer, no answer. And then he's like, well, do you know how to record? I was like, yeah, actually I do. He said, can you get me set up? Give me a track. I want to lay some vocals down. Like, all right, cool. So ever since then, Bobby and I became really cool. And whenever he came into town, he always requested me to be his engineer. One time we were just in the studio set up and he just vibing out and he's asking me, did I know how to do beats? I'm like, yeah, I know how to do beats. So I started doing some beats for him, kind of as his assistant producer. I wasn't even a full-fledged producer back then. Ever since then, we've been cool. He would fly me out to different places, and we went to Paramount Studios out in LA and we recorded the Panther soundtrack. I think Mario Van Peebles and his dad was the executive producers and director of that film. We laid the soundtrack to it. From there, we were just everywhere, you know. Back in Atlanta, Bobby was a party animal back then, and so he would never be in his full conscious state of mind. So when I started producing with him, I had got contracted to do 2 songs through MCA. Me and my buddy, Jerry Flowers, he's like one of my mentors. And we could never get him to finish the record. But whenever you go work with somebody else like a Babyface or a Teddy Riley, I mean, knock it out, you know. There was another crazy time in the studio. Bobby wasn't supposed to be driving, right? So he would always get arrested. And his brother would always have to go get him out, Tommy Brown. One day, however, before he was coming back to the studio, there was like Atlanta beef. It was rivalry back then. They had some beef. Somebody was driving down the street. It was on Antone Street. And it was like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden we hear gunshots. Pow, 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 pow. And we immediately hit the floor. And we hear that the windows getting bust out and they take off. You know, when Bobby got back, I think AJ. So AJ was responsible. AJ used to be a security detail, him and Big Dog. And Mike, I think Mike was like his cousin or something like that. So AJ was responsible for finding Usher back in the day. He's a comedian now, and I think he's on tour with New Edition and Teddy Riley and all them. But nonetheless, they came back to the studio and never figured out who it was. I didn't figure it out. It was, you know, beyond my pay grade at that point. But there was some crazy, crazy times with Bobby. I've seen some fun times and I've seen some dark times, but those were my times with Bobby Brown.